top 5 algae eaters that absolutely do a nice job cleaning algae on the side of your aquarium. And one in particular, the flagfish, does a reasonable job going after that little filamentous algae, the hair algae that grows from rocks and gravel. In general, before we even go into these fish, if you have an algae problem, probably a combination of all these: overfeeding the fish, not doing your water changes, and keeping the light on too long, or your aquarium is exposed to sunlight. First, don't overfeed your fish. And since you already have an algae problem, try and physically remove as much algae as you can. Do a water change, partial water change. You're going to have to do 1 partial water change a week for, and I'm going to say 1 partial water change, 20%, for about 3 weeks. And cut the light. Even if you have live plants, they'll be okay with 4 hours a day for a while. And just, you're going to have to move your aquarium if the sunlight's hitting them and you don't want that algae. It's good for the fish. They like the algae. Most people don't like algae in their fish tanks. So those are the most important things. Secondarily is adding fish or snails to your tank to eliminate algae. They just do a reasonable job. They don't eliminate algae, but they do an okay job keeping it down once you have your aquarium in balance. Oh, that was wordy, sorry. So, like and subscribe to the channel anyways. I'm supposed to say that more often because of the producers telling me to, and he's here. So the first one, I'm going to kick off with the most popular, the fish with the popular name Algae-Eater. There's several of them. We're not going to do Chinese and gold algae eaters. And gold algae eaters are Chinese algae eaters that have been bred to have a gold color. Most of them are albino, so they have red eyes, but not all of them. Gold algae eaters and Chinese algae eaters, same species. They get big, they get mean, and they're scavengers. They're not algae eaters, but they're cheap. And I sell a ton from the warehouse. But for your little aquarium, even though I like the sale, don't buy them. Tell your aquarium store to contact us and get Siamese algae eaters or flying fox. Siamese algae eaters and flying fox algae eaters. They are so hard to figure out the difference. They're caught in the wild. They ship them over from Asia, and a lot of times the exporters will say flying fox, they'll say Siamese, and now almost all the time they say Siamese flying fox. So what the heck is that? And a lot of times you won't get either one. You'll get what's called a false Siamese algae eater. And I've had like probably half a dozen species that look so similar, and all of them good algae eaters, but you know, I have to sell them as a flying fox or Siamensis, but I know they're hybrids of some sort in the wild. These ones came in as Siamensis. These are Siamese or Siamensis algae eaters. Fantastic fish for community tanks, peaceful. They really do not disturb plants, but they're tough enough, hardy enough that you could keep them with cichlids. They will eat the algae that's on the side of your tank, that's growing on rocks, that's growing on plants. So not a bad addition to any aquarium if one of your goals is to have a fish without a lot of color, but with a lot of activity and a lot of utility use. So they're a nice fish. They are just silver with a solid black line down the center of the body. They're not going to color up as they get older, but they do only grow to about 4.5 inches. And even at that size, they're very peaceful. So I recommend these as the top number. I'm going from number 1. I don't want you to get, too excited and wait for the big finale. So this is the best one for algae eating control, the Siamese algae eater. Second best is the flying fox. And the reason I had confusion is because I won't be able to separate them once I put them in, because they move around so quick and they look so similar. In general, the flying fox, if you want to go to the aquarium store and see the difference, flying foxes are also great algae eaters, but they have a little more rusty gold color to the body. That's the easiest way to tell. But I wouldn't worry about either one. When you look on the internet, you'll see that the flying fox is more aggressive, blah, blah, blah. But compared to the Chinese algae eater, which is really aggressive, and the way you look for that is a checkered pattern on it. It has a vertical and horizontal bars on the body. Stay away from that fish, or if it's a gold algae eater. But the flying fox has that same long black line, and it's supposed to be more territorial. I've had flying foxes, the algae Siamensis, and I've never seen any issues. So I think it's a little nitpicky. They're both great fish, and you can put them together. Flying fox, all these come from Thailand, and they come from the same streams, so they get mixed up quite a bit. You get some Siamensis with a little black spot at the tail end. Same thing with flying fox. That means they're hybridized. You just get a little variation in colors and patterns depending on where they catch them in the rivers. Don't worry about it. As long as they're not a Chinese algae eater and they're close to the true Siamensis or true flying fox, it's a great algae eater. Don't expect it to get more than 5 inches in your aquarium and expect it to be pretty peaceful. Flying foxes, if you see that gold color, rusty color on the body, sometimes it manifests itself as almost a gold line above the black line. It's going to be a little more active when it gets older. It's not going to be to the point that's going to knock out all your plants out of the soil or eat fish or anything like that. You're fine with it. All these fish we're showing in this episode are commonly called catfish. So, and then they get divided into the more common names in the hobby, like the algae eaters, Siamese, gold, Chinese, remember, stay away from the checkered pattern. And then you have Plecostomus. We have a point we picked out. Bushy nose is one of our top algae eaters here. Bushy nose Plecos. The Otocinclus stands alone. It's a unique little catfish because it only grows to 1.5 inches. Peaceful, it's active, and it's a terrific algae eater. But again, because of its size, it's only going to be effective in maybe a 5-gallon to 10-gallon aquarium. Anything more than that, you'd have to put a whole passel in them. And if you want an aquarium, it's going to be pretty boring if it's just a tank full of Otocinclus. But a nice school of 4 or 5 Otocinclus, that's a good addition to something like a 10-gallon tank or a 20-gallon tank. But don't expect them to keep that algae down. They'll just trim it up. These are 2 Otocinclus here. They are all wild caught. No one's breeding Otocinclus. And one reason is because they're very plentiful and very cheap to import. No one's breeding Otocinclus for the trade. And in fact, if there's any hobbyists in there that are successfully breeding Otocinclus, it would be great to hear a note from you because I'm not aware of anyone actually breeding it in the hobby. So that would be something cool to spread around. They are imported from several countries. They're all over the Amazon basin. Most of them come from Colombia. Secondarily, they come from Peru. These ones came from Colombia. There's 2 basic forms of Otocinclus. There's a few species, but there's a Finis and Marinus. Those are the most common. And those guys, one's a little smaller, golder color than the other. These ones are the most common ones you'll see, which has a little long black line, a little black dot at the end. They'll just move around all day long looking for little bits of algae to eat. I recommend these as these are in second place. First place, Siamese algae eaters. Second place, Otocinclus. And these are the Otocinclus. Okay, the species I've told you so far are typically $4.99 in the pet store. This next one, I put it third on the list because they're so effective at algae control. But as far as affordability, they go a little bit higher in the pay scale. They're going to be in the $20 to $30 range. It's called Pandara pandagobi. Gara flavrata is the scientific name. Panda because it has black markings and light, not white, but light silver markings. So it's the kind of a trade way of stretching the truth to create, it doesn't really have much of a panda pattern, but it's not my fault. I did not pick the common name for this fish, but it's a pretty fish. It's a Pandara, has really like butterfly fins, zips around the aquarium quite fast, grows to 5 inches, and it's a peaceful fish, but a very, very effective algae eater. It is tank raised now, so it's plentiful, but because it's tank raised, you usually get the breeder size. They ship them as soon as they're big enough to survive in an aquarium, so they're typically 1 inch in size. I like to get them 2 inches, but I haven't seen anyone shipping them in that size for the last couple years. 2 inches is a really great sweet spot. If you see that in a pet store, a 2-inch Pandara for 20 to 30 bucks, that's a good fish. But it's expensive for just an algae eater. Remember, you pay for what you get. These guys have really beautiful finnage. They have a nice pattern, and again, they're very, very effective algae eaters. So Pandara or pandagobi, and not panda loach, Pandara or pandagobi. That's a totally different species, and not a good algae eater. So I was a bit remiss in the first show on algae eaters because I didn't have any American flagfish in the warehouse. They are a great filamentous algae eater, but they only are effective, they like new shoots. So if you have long filamentous algae, like that big matty hairy algae, you just got to physically remove that and get it out of there. You don't throw a bunch of these guys in there and expect them to take care of it, but they do keep some of it from taking over by getting it before it starts to grow long. And so they're a terrific addition for just that type of algae. They also are very patriotic. They have the males particularly display, it looks like an American flag on the side of their body. The older they get, the more predominant, because they're getting closer to breeding season and they want to show their colors, the more predominant those colors get. These, there's a couple males in here, so you'll see there's one male and two females, so you will see that pattern. They're not really good for that slime algae that you see on the side of the fish tank, but they are good for the other type of algae. So they're a little bit different than Siamese Sensus or Odocinclus, so it might be a good idea to have both. They all get along. I would say in the pet store, $5.99 is a fair price for these guys. A little school of fish. You don't have to live in a school. They're not a schooling fish, but they, 4 or 5 will stay together and make a nice display, especially have one male trying to get the attention of the females. This is the American flagfish. I finally have some in the warehouse, unlike last time we did this, and I didn't. They're bred in Florida. In fact, they're native from the Carolinas all the way through the Florida tropic zone. So northern Florida all the way through the Carolinas. This is a native species. So if you want to support America, get an American flagfish. Our little wholesale warehouse is known for its plecos. So I had to grab one to represent algae-eating plecos, because not all of them, but most plecos are herbivores, but these little guys are super herbivores. They're the bushy-nosed plecos. And they're also really hardy and very peaceful and only grow, they max out about 4.5 inches. Interesting fish, not a lot of color, but they get little like antler horns on their nose, particularly the males. The females get The females get just a few little growth spots, but the males can get really big, bunchy antlers, I guess, for lack of a better word. So the bristles, which is the most common name for these growths on the snout of these plecos, and they're also called bristle-nosed plecos, bushy-nosed plecos, or bristle-nosed plecos. The scientific name is odontodes, and odontodes distinguish the males from the females. The females have very small odontodes and the males have very dominant, long, branchy odontodes. So right now, these guys are juveniles, are only 1 inch and maybe 1/4 long, barely any branching on their snouts. You can't tell a male from a female, but once they hit 3 inches, very easy to tell. If you want to try and breed these in your tank, look for a male and a female and throw them into your tank and see what happens. They live about 8 years. They grow to only 4.5 inches. They are good algae eaters and scavengers throughout their lifespan. So they're pretty good addition to everything but a nano tank, where at 4.5 inches, it might be a big fish for, a 2 or 3 gallon baby tank. But anything 5 gallons and up, it's a great addition. And also great price. They and Trinidad plecos are the cheapest in our trade. Trinidad plecos I don't recommend because they grow really big. If you don't believe me, go down to Florida or go to Hawaii and see these massive things that are all over the place. Very invasive, not really good for algae at all. Really just a scavenger. And these guys are cheap and they're a great pleco. Typical price would be $10 in an aquarium store. Would be a fair price for a small guy, anywhere from $8 to $10. Bigger guys, you pay, remember, doubles for every time you double the size of a fish. You usually double the price of the fish in the store or wholesale. And so this is the bushy-nosed pleco. I put these in last, not because they're the least of the, how many algae eaters did we do? So we're gonna do 5, so we did 6. So this is not 6th place. These guys are in the family of Hillstream Loaches. Hillstream Loaches are generally from China. They live, and there's Chinese Hillstream Loaches, there's polka dot Hillstream Loaches, and there's reticulated Hillstream Loaches. Those are the 3 main loaches of the Hillstream family you'll see in the trade. They have some more exotic ones, a red tail loach, which is basically a Hillstream Loach with a red tail, and a yellow tail. You don't see those very often. They're wild caught, no one's breeding them. These are also wild caught, but they're much more common. The reticulated Hillstream Loach have the best pattern. The polka dot have a nice pattern. Both of them have the same disposition. pH, they tolerate almost everything in the aquatic environment. Same thing with temperatures. They'll handle everything up to 80, not so good in the 80s. And they go down to 70 degrees, they'll do fine. They're called Hillstream Loaches because they're caught in streams that run out of hills. And they live on rocks where they eat the algae growing on rocks. So they have a very flat profile so they don't get washed down the stream. Also makes them really neat to look at on the glass of the aquarium, because they're like flounders stuck on the side of your aquarium. But if you ever want to get one out, if you're doing like a massive water change or something, it's a pain. Like in the wholesale warehouse here, we always give the new guy the job. If it gets on an order form, we give the new guys, they say, hey, can you catch 20 of the Hillstream Loaches? And then, you know, these are so hard to catch. And the guys just say, hey, come on, man, we're on our 5th bag, 6th bag. And he's still trying to scrape these guys without hurting them off the tank and putting them back. So it's a lot of fun, but it's not as fun as electric catfish. That's really fun with new guys and girls. They both have similar disposition. The reticulated Hillstream Loaches are a little more expensive. Typically, you're going to spend $14 for a polka dot Hillstream Loach and $20 for a reticulated Hillstream Loach. Two separate species. Borneo sucker is a typical name for the polka dot Hillstream Loach, and Duilitella is the scientific name for reticulated Hillstream Loach. And there's a Chinese Hillstream Loach that's even cheaper in a solid gray color, same cool profile. And because, also because of that flat profile, they're also called UFOs, like flying saucer UFO loaches. But the Chinese Hillstream Loaches, once you get to high 70s, they die off. They don't like warm temperatures. They really are designed for colder temperatures. So actually, it wouldn't be bad for a small goldfish bowl. Might be a pretty cool addition for that. The other guys, fine in tropical conditions. All these I showed you on the show, great additions for any small size to mid-size aquarium, and all good algae eaters, but will not remove the algae you have. You have to find out what's causing it. Usually it's overfeeding, sunlight, or you're keeping the light on the aquarium too long. Correct that first, and then expect some results from these fun little water pets. And if you do like these fish and want to like and subscribe to my show, because we have a lot more fish in the warehouse to show you, please, where do I put my finger? Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe to the show. So please like and subscribe to the show, and most of all, get an aquarium.